Hello, I'm Ari Lax, and this week I will be continuing to bring you the best Eldrazi content there is, this time in Legacy. So, to give some background on this general archetype, pretty much forever in Legacy there's been decks that play 4 Ancient Tomb, 4 City of Traders, and Chalice of the Void, other artifact-based stacks, prison, hate cards, and then whatever creatures they can play with the mana available to them. So, I'm going to list off some creatures that have been played in these decks over the years, and we can then laugh about how bad they are. For example, Sea Drake, 2 and a blue for a 4/3 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, return 2 target lands you control to their owner's hand. So if you control one land, for example, you played City of Traders Chalice on one, and then played an island. It doesn't have 2 legal targets, so the trigger doesn't happen. Why is that a card? I don't know. Why is that a drawback on a 4/3 flyer? I don't know. I mean, it's a thing. Let's see. Um, Preeminent Captain has seen some play in lists like these. 2 and a white, 2/2. Put a soldier in play when it attacks first strike. And you have Hero Blade Hold. Rakdos Pit Dragon, 2 red red for a 3/3 red. Give it fire or red to +1/+0. Double red to give it flying, and if you're hellbent, it gets double strike. Spawn Writhe, which is 2 and a green, 2/2 trample. Whenever it deals combat damage to a opponent player, I don't know which. Put a copy of it into play. Um, let's see, what are the great ones? Hanweir Watchkeep. It is a 2 and a red for a 1/5 human werewolf soldier or warrior. I don't know which. Uh, it has defender, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, it has the werewolf flip trigger. So if no spells were cast, it flips into a 5/5 that must attack each turn. That flips back if a player's played 2 or more spells. So those Mog Catcher, which is 2 red red for a 2/2, 3 tap, put a goblin from your deck into play. That one was 9-0 at Grand Prix Seattle last winter, or this winter, so 3 months ago. So that one's the most recent tech. The list is pretty horrific. Fortunately, we now get to play good creatures in these decks, and not have to play 6-drops. That's the other thing. There have been like Ancient Tomb decks that have like Wormcoil Engine, but there's this kind of issue where you want to like actually play your early things. I don't know, like playing creatures on turn 2, good idea usually. To follow up your stacked cards, or not having to draw 3 lands to play everything. Um, which is why those decks have really trended towards nonsense like Cloud Post, which is like whatever. I don't even know. When you start putting Spine of Isha in your deck, I start really wondering what you're doing with your life. Um, anyways, you now get to play good creatures. You now get to play 16 Ancient Tombs for your good creatures. Eye of Ugin, Eldrazi Temple. You've got the Mimics, you've got the Reshapers, you've got Phyrexian Revoker is a pretty good stacks piece. Effectively, it shuts off a lot of things in the format. So, Sensei's Divining Top, Lion's Eye Diamond, Deathrite Shaman. Let's keep naming cards that are really good to shut down with Revoker. Heritage Druid, Wirewood Symbiote, Sneak Attack. Oh, gosh. The list just keeps Aether Vial. It just goes on and on. The cards are just like really good in the format against a lot of things. Stoneforge Mystic, Umezawa's Jite, Batterskull. I'm just going to keep going eventually. Let's see. Endless One's kind of the bridge the gap card. It's cheap if you need it to be, big if you need it to be. We know all about this from Modern. Thought-Knot Seer, Reality Smasher, those are the actually good creatures. Endbringer is also really good. It takes over certain matchups, beats bigger creatures. And in Modern, you have this issue with this card where like having like Temple Eye is not realistic. But in this format, having Tomb City Eye is just a thing that's going to happen. It's going to be a 3-mana creature, which is about the point where it starts being good. You're lighter on hate than most stacks or stompy decks, as you can see the Spaghetti Stompy title. The lower to the ground versions of this are traditionally called that. Don't ask legacy names. So you're lighter. The other lists usually have like things. Let's see. Recently, there's been choke in those lists with Obstinate Baloth. That was in the Dig Through Time era. They've had Blood Moon, things like that. Whereas this deck just has Thorn of Amethyst, Chalice of the Void. You're relying on your Smashers and Seers to actually kill them fast enough to matter. And Warping Wail is actually a really huge add. So just ignore all the other texts and just look at counter target sorcery. So in your Ancient Tomb City of Traders deck, you're usually reasonably likely to play this for 1 mana or 1 land. people just play Envelop in their Legacy decks. This is a Envelop in a deck that's light on interaction that also exiles Deathrite Shaman, any Elf card, Stoneforge Mystic, Young Pyro, Delver Secrets. Oh my gosh, there's another really good one to exile with it that I'm forgetting right now. There's just so many targets for this card. It's just so good. And the sorcery thing, so like all the combo decks, Infernal Tutor, Show and Tell, Terminus is a card to counter with this, Natural Order, and Green Sun Zenith, and Glimpse of Nature. It just kind of does everything, and at worst, lets you go two, make a thing, turn two, Reality Smash you. Notice how all of our cards are creatures for Thorn of Amethyst. And then you got some value-ish lands. You do need to be able to put your things into play through Force of Will sometimes. Wasteland's a card. It's kind of like one of the big things about Legacy. And Urborg's kind of an Ancient Tomb if you draw an eye. Moving to the sideboard. So the original list of this, so this list was originally passed on to me by John Johnson, who won like a, I want to say like 40, 50 person-ish event in Michigan with it. He also won a similar size event with the Hanweir Watchkeep version of this deck a couple years ago. So, yeah, these decks are quite a delight. He's known for playing some wild ones. So, yeah, there used to be Umezawa's GT in the sideboard, but we ended up cutting it, which might be wrong depending on how many mirrors you play. You'll notice, I will make the point, cards you can board in versus lands reasonably. Like, you probably don't want like multiples, but 13, these aren't actually the greatest, but like you have upwards of 13 cards you could board in if you wanted. This kills like exploration or whatever. So this is a good way to sweep away cheap threats, delvers, pyros, elves, etc. But it also protects you from being cold to enchantments like Moat. Not very well, but it does some amount of work there. More Warping Whale for you want to warp their whales. Let's see. Tormod's Crypts, you do have to beat certain graveyard decks, dredge, lands, really. Crucible for mirrors where Looping Wasteland is the end of the game, as well as any other grindy matchup like that where Looping Wasteland beats them, as well as against opposing Looping Wastelands like lands. Winter Orb, another card to beat lands, also bigger control decks can get KO'd by this, and then Pithy Needle. More Revokers, but it can also name Wasteland against lands. As you'll notice, there's a lot of ways to beat lands in the sideboard. Yeah, this deck's interesting. I don't think it's absurd the way Modern is, because the Legacy decks are just so much better, but it's definitely powerful enough to be a contender, and I'm interested in showing off a bit of what it can do.